morning, everyone. Good to see everyone here on day 3. I'm Leslie Kaufman. I'm with Bloomberg Green. We're going to check in to see if we have Jigar.
I'm here. I think I'm very large right behind you.
Oh, terrific. I'm looking the other way, but I'm hoping that you can see me as I look in your eyes. So, Jigar, there's no one who's more pivotal to the clean energy transition than you are. And I thought we'd check in to see how you think things are going at this point. And I'm just going to put a little parentheses around that, which is I've seen in recent stories, including those at my own publication, Bloomberg, where you've expressed a little frustration at the speed at which things are going. I think you've said that, you've $400 billion in loans to give away, and yet, you only have applications for about $121 billion. You've also said that, we're not deploying as much zero carbon energy as we should. We're doing about half of what we had hoped we would be doing. So I thought you could just give us a little context on where we stand now.
Well, thank you so much. First of all, let me just say, I'm so sorry that I'm not there in person. I know so many people that are in the audience there, and thank you for all of the support you guys have given me and the rest of the administration in the last couple of years. I think to your question, Les, I think we're in a place right now where the president has reversed 40 years of direction in this country, right? I mean, for 40 years, we said we are going to develop technology here, the best in the world, and we are going to commercialize it in another continent, right? So we're going to send it to Asia, send it to Europe, send it to other places, but we don't want to do industrial strategy here. That has all changed with the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and Inflation Reduction Act, and then, of course, CHIPS and Science. And so it is not surprising to me that the muscle memory is lost in this country, and we don't know how to do big things here, how to, get high quality labor trained and ready to go, how to get through the 417-point checklist to get a project fully approved and financed and ready to go. Now, a lot of that expertise is in the solar and wind industry because we've been doing a lot of that work for the last 20 years. And I'm heartened to see a lot of my old colleagues in that industry moving into hydrogen, moving into carbon sequestration and storage, moving into transmission deployment and other big areas because their expertise will allow us to move faster. But I guess where I'm most frustrated, honestly, is in the ambition of the current private sector players. In general, I would say most of the private sector players I talk to, I think are not using these incentives to push farther and harder, but instead to optimize their current portfolio to make more money.
So how do you bridge that gap? How do we move to the next? How do you get people to think more innovatively to get out of their comfort zones?
Well, you have to make it so that the people who are thinking more creatively and in a more innovative fashion are the ones who win, right? I mean, that's sort of how this works. And the Loan Programs Office is here for that, right? You can't get money from us for last year's business model. We only fund next year's business model. And so we have about $127 billion worth of loan applications received across 150 active applicants. And they represent the people who are willing to be bold, be innovative, be on the front lines of figuring this out. And, and the goal is and when you look at our history, the companies who've received money out of the Loan Programs Office are the ones who have been the most successful in the last 14 years.
And are you allowed to say what you think among those are particularly exciting? Can you give us any sort of actual examples?
Sure. I mean, look, I think that when you look at what Monolith Materials is doing with methane pyrolysis technology, that's 1980s technology that was tried to be commercialized in the 90s, failed miserably. They have been at it for the better part of 10 years to get it to be stable. And what they're really doing is separating the carbon and hydrogen bonds in natural gas, but they can also do ethane to create carbon black and hydrogen. Carbon black goes into tires, which last I checked, electric vehicles still use, and hydrogen, which last I checked is in a big hype cycle these days. And and so that's awesome, very cost effective, a game changer. But the other thing is that from the rest of the president's agenda, The largest exporter of carbon black in the world today is Russia. So figuring out how we free ourselves from that supply chain is useful. I think the second piece is that, we're trying to make sure we're reskilling employees. The skills that you need there, a lot of the folks who work at current refineries are perfect people to work in this particular process. And so you're talking about just transition for workers, which is great. And then the last thing I'd say is all of the carbon black manufacturing facilities we have in the United States today are all under a consent decree with EPA and the Department of Justice because they are some of the worst polluting facilities in the country for justice communities in their communities, right? So helping those folks phase out and replacing them with the latest technology is something we want to do. And we have this story at least 25 more times across the Loan Programs Office and across, frankly, the administration. And so I love talking about it. And I do think that it's time to take DOE technology and innovation, which we've been good at for 45 years, and link it to American commercialization.
Yeah, no, it's very exciting. So one of the things I did want to talk to you about is you talked about sort of a lack of ambition to get out of people's comfort zones. But the other thing from reporting I hear a lot about is this sort of lack of skills on the ground. You mentioned that. I just wonder if you could talk about it. Is that something that you're seeing? And are there training programs in place to help people make the transition to these new skills?
Yeah, I think that when you look at, the national building trades, I mean, they have 1,700 training centers, and they're starting to actually, fill up with apprentices who want to get into the trades, which I think is great. But one of the things that I think is a little bit sort of confusing for folks is you can imagine for many people who are venture capital backed, right? They went to business schools that were, basically trained them to be anti-union from birth. And frankly, we've had sort of 40 years of being anti-union, so it's not surprising that people get there. When we talk to them in the Loan Programs Office and say, forget about the union part of it, let's just talk about where you're going to get quality workers from. The vast majority of the folks that we talk to haven't thought about it, right? They just staved off bankruptcy for the last 7 years and finally raised their D round and are finally building their first of a kind facility. So I understand that they're consumed by their technology and making it work, not on all these other issues.
Right,
totally get it.
So labor's sort of an afterthought, and then they get there and it turns out to be an issue that's sort of slowing them down.
And so we've been reminding them early in our process, hey, what are you doing on this? I'll give you an example. One of the applicants that we're working with, they just hired an EPC contractor, and that was the extent to their involvement. And we said, your EPC contractor is explicitly banning union subcontractors. And they're like, oh, well, I wasn't intending to. I just want high quality workers. And, I said, look, the ramifications of this is one of the trades that your EPC contractors hiring for is bringing people in from around the country, putting them up in motels for a year and a half to do this work, when there's a local union 60 miles away that would do this for 35% cheaper prices. And he's like, I didn't know. And I was like, well, that's how this works. So, that's why I'm educating you. But also, this facility will be up and running in about 3 years. This is the time to partner with the local community college to make sure that they're training the workforce that you need. And he's like, yeah, again, I didn't think about that, right?
Yeah. Well, I did know this morning you had some news, and I wanted to talk to you about that.
Sure. We partnered with you guys on it.
Yeah, I know. I was going to mention that, but I thought I'd be humble. But so talk to us a little bit about the news, some battery factories. And I think that part of what I want to know about that is a little bit about where a lot's been written about how a lot of this is happening in red states. And I know that was in the original design of the bill, right? So maybe we can talk a little bit about that. But first, tell us about your news announcement.
Yeah, sure. So we announced a $9.2 billion loan to Blue Oval, which is a joint venture between Ford and SK Innovation. And we're excited about it because it's 127 gigawatt hours of manufacturing capacity. It represents about 1/6 of the president's full goal of getting to 50% of all vehicles sold in 2030 would be electric. And these battery manufacturing facilities will be able to supply roughly 1/6 of all of those batteries. So in combination with the GMLTM announcement we made earlier, we're almost halfway to the goal. And I think that we also announced 4 additional deals, Core in Arizona, Redwood and Li-Cycle in the recycling space for critical minerals, and then Syrah Resources and Ioneer, Rhyolite Ridge in Nevada. And so when you think about the work that we're doing, it's the entire supply chain from getting all the critical minerals to market within the United States to manufacturing those batteries here. And again, it's tying U.S. Department of Energy technology to the American worker.
Well, so can you talk a little bit about the impression that a lot of this is happening in red states and the deliberateness of that strategy?
I wouldn't say it's deliberate. I would say that, these companies are choosing to go to markets where there are, people looking for jobs, frankly, right? And a lot of these states have communities that have disadvantaged communities, have places where there used to be a manufacturing facility that went out of business 20 years ago, that, where people can reliably hire folks to work in these facilities, right? And so I wouldn't say it's a deliberate strategy of blue versus red. I'd say it's more about finding places that are either previously affected by manufacturing plant closures or are currently being affected by the energy transition with closing power plants or other infrastructure where the workers really need a just transition.
Right. So I understand what you're saying, but I guess what I'm wondering is, this is an industrial policy. It clearly is hopefully bringing jobs back to the American heartland, which has been hollowed out. But has there been, I was a little bit surprised to see that it continued to be attacked in the political process, especially in the debt ceiling discussions. Do you expect that to change, or were you surprised to still see that the IRA and the money going to these sorts of things are still very political?
Well, as many people in the audience know here, that is a question that I am wholly incapable of answering because I'm not very political. But what I'd say is that, having been in the job for 2 years and learning a little bit about this, I often see that the political attacks are completely disconnected from what's happening on the ground, right? And every one of these House members and Senate members are calling us and sending in letters of support for these projects in their community. So on the one hand, I think there's a battleground that goes on, and on the other hand, I think people care deeply about making sure that folks in their community are getting access to good quality jobs.
So let's go back to where we stand now with transitioning to a clean and green energy system and economy. Where you've talked about lack of ambition, maybe in the particularly in the power deployment sector. What do you see coming up in these next couple of years in terms of what you'd like to see happen and what you see changing and what people will maybe experience as they go about their daily lives?
Yeah, look, I think that when you think about this approach to wealth creation, right? So you have a whole bunch of smart people who decide that this is the sector they want to work in. They start a company, they join an early stage company, they raise all these rounds of funding, they finally get to a product that they want to serve. And they need an enabling ecosystem, right? You need folks to believe that the future will be better than the past, right? That's why equity investors invest and debt investors invest, because they think this will be a good investment for them. And so part of what DOE is doing for the first time is actually recording this momentum from the private sector. So those are the liftoff reports we issued earlier this year around nuclear, carbon management, hydrogen, and long duration energy storage. And in those reports, we show that private sector capital formation in carbon management and hydrogen is off the charts, right? Over $40 billion of the capital formation already in those projects. Long duration energy storage is probably only at $9 billion. It needs to be closer to 40. So there's a set of things that the private sector is asking for to get there, right? They need better market signals from the regional transmission operators. They need, ways of getting compensated, right? And then I think on the nuclear side, they have also their own challenges that we're working our way through, right? And so for each of the 17 plus sectors that we need to be able to scale up to reach this decarbonization goal by the president for 2035 for the grid and 2050 for the economy, you will have uneven deployment, right? So some sectors will go much faster than others, and for a variety of reasons, right? So some are market structure based, and those are things that we can comment on and be helpful on. And some of them are lack of ambition, right? When you think about where the electric vehicle industry is today, I think we all can acknowledge that it wouldn't be there without Elon Musk and Tesla's efforts, right? And so that's not something you can plan for, right? Some of these sectors just have a person who, just has this indomitable spirit that is going to just power through whatever hurdles are in their way to get to the finish line. You see that now emerging in advanced geothermal with some of the entrepreneurs. You see that in the hydrogen space and the carbon management space. Now we need to see that in some of the other sectors.
Great. So advanced geothermal and hydrogen. Will we start feeling some of these impacts in our real life, like as we sort of go about it? I mean, will as regular consumers, will we begin to feel the impacts of what the White House is doing?
Well, it's twofold, right? One is the actual impacts, which, yes, I think you will feel those impacts. And two is whether we're talking about it. The more people talk about it, the more they feel it. I'll give you an example. The people who are on Tesla Electric this week in Texas, they're now getting paid $4.50 a kilowatt hour to discharge from their power walls in Texas. If yesterday and the day before yesterday's ERCOT market happens more this summer, they will have a zero electricity bill this summer.
Very nice.
Net of those credits, right? Now, so they will feel it, right? That's all our work on virtual power plants and all this other stuff that we've done. But if people don't talk about it, then other people may not know that they can get in on this action too, right? And so part of this is actually recognizing that we have these data points and they're real, right? I mean, I can point to them in Rochester, New York with Li-Cycle. I can point to them in Reno, Nevada with Redwood. I can point to them in Buckeye, Arizona with Core. I can point to how we're transforming communities. But then, other mayors and other folks have to talk about it and say, yeah, I want that for my community. And, here are the 3 or 4 or 5 steps that we have to take to bring, that level of investment to our community.
Terrific. Well, we're at the 1 minute time frame, so I wanted to give it back to you to see if there's anything else you wanted to impress upon the audience or say about what you think the U.S. government might be doing in addition to what it's already doing to get us there.
Yeah, look, what I would say is that for many of us, we were around. I mean, Amy and I worked very closely together on the Waxman-Markey bill. I think what really failed there was it was mostly pushed by environmentalists and had less support from labor and justice communities, right? I think what succeeded here is we had the full support of justice communities, labor, and the environmental community. And you saw that with the prevailing wage requirements, with the 5Xing of the tax credits for apprenticeship programs, for all of that stuff. And then I think you also see the staunch commitment that the president has around 40% of all the benefits going to justice communities. These things don't happen formulaically through a model that's done by Jesse Jenkins at the Princeton, University lab, right? It happens because all of us have to change the way we think about things, right? And a lot of us are selfishly thinking about the way that we want our project to be done. But I do think the ecosystem matters. And if you want enduring political support for this new effort, then we all have to be thinking about how we bring labor and justice, environmental groups, everyone along, and make sure that people are being flexible in the way that they can be to accommodate other people's perspectives, right? I mean, this is all new muscle memory for us, and we're building it now, right? And so let's choose to take the route of best practices today.
Terrific. Well, I want to thank you again so much for making time from your very busy schedule to be with us. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thanks, everybody.